I'm so happy today to have Vadim Mozyrsky here. Thanks so much for coming, man. I've been hoping to get you on the show, and I'm happy you're here. So,
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm glad to be here. I've been following your show, and thank you for offering time for me.
yeah, no problem. Yeah, I was just telling you a second ago. I am so eager to see change in this county, and I think you represent some of that change, at least in my mind. And yeah, I've had Jesse Burke on here as well, who I think is a great candidate. I've had Brian Knotts on here, and I always just wanted to put the message out. If anyone's interested in coming on, just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll try to get you on the show. Um, so yeah, before I kind of get into my normal questions, I wanted to ask you because it's been going on this week about the PSU stuff and your reaction to that.
hmm
Yeah, like how did you feel about that? I know some of it's they're repairing the library now and stuff, but how did you feel about what's been happening this week?
Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations about this, and well, I think like most people out there, we support free speech, but we don't support destruction, and that's what we're seeing right now is people that are hijacking that free speech movement. Whether it be what's happening with PSU and the question about how we need to address the Middle East conflict, or the numerous things that have happened before in the history of Portland. We see that there's some anarchists that latch on to that and cause destruction. The mindset of that, I don't really understand, but we know what happens. And so, if you look at the arrests that were made there, last I heard, 33 people were arrested. Only 7 of them were students.
Right.
And then I read an email where it was actually listed who was arrested. I mean, there were people that were 40 years old, 60 years old. Obviously, there are people that came to that for ulterior reasons. Some of them may be supporting the students, but the destruction was massive. I heard last night that the library might be closed for as long as a year.
Yeah.
And that mhm.
Yeah, I was just telling yesterday. I heard September, but that's even you heard a year.
I
Yeah.
heard it might be a year. Part of that is I think they want to renovate it, but part of it is there's so much destruction. You see the pictures on there, graffiti everywhere. Basically, a lot of the stuff that we see outdoors in the neighborhoods came indoors into the library. All
Mm,
the graffiti, trash, broken items. I heard that there were several book collections that were
right.
stolen.
Right.
So if you're protesting what's happening in the Middle East, that's your right. But stealing books and graffitiing a library, closing it down for students, many of whom are trying to educate themselves so they can get good jobs and move on, that doesn't help anybody. And that's what we're seeing, oftentimes here in Portland. There's a sense of lawlessness and destruction.
Hmm.
And we as a society can't stand up for that. We need to make sure that we uphold peace, whether here or in the Middle East, but certainly peace here, which entails, don't walk around breaking windows and graffitiing things and pretend that it's free speech because that's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I was saying the past few days too, and I just think it's hugely important because like we've been trying to rebuild this downtown core for the past few years, and I feel like this just sets us back,
Yeah.
because my guess yesterday was saying for law enforcement at least, it gives them a lot of PTSD from 2020. They had 180 days of this kind of stuff, and um, but yeah, I just wanted to get your reaction to that, so thank you. So yeah, as far as the county, you're running District 1.
Yes.
Um, Tell me about that district and kind of why you got into the county race.
So District 1 is all the west side, and then southeast from 84 down to about 40th Street, 42nd Street. It kind of meanders around, but inner southeast. And I got into the race really a few years ago because I wanted to address the biggest issues, which is homelessness, drug addiction, mental illness that we're seeing in our streets, and making sure that people have housing, low cost housing, rental housing, whatever that might look like, but also addressing public safety issues. And that's one of the reasons I ran for city council, because I thought my opponent in the race was doing a really bad job, and I wanted to do a better job. What I learned a lot in running for city council was that the mayor and city council get blamed for a lot of these things,
Mhm.
but the people that actually hold the purse strings, the people that are actually making the policies that are addressing these issues, are supposed to address these issues, are at the county. And so, I ran for city council, and Renee Gonzalez got a few more votes than me, so I didn't make it past the primary, but I learned a lot. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to run for office again. People were asking me whether I wanted to run for district attorney. I was mulling that over. But um, what happened really that kind of that made me decide to run for the county commission was I was talking to a friend of mine who had a 12-year-old daughter at the time, now a 13-year-old daughter, but she was relating how they were walking around downtown and her daughter was pointing out people that were smoking fentanyl and telling her mom about fentanyl pointing out people that were using methamphetamines and explaining to her mom what methamphetamines were.
Wow.
Now, I don't know about you, but when I was 12 years old, I was riding a bike around. I was in parks playing with friends. I had a fairly carefree lifestyle. And our kids should as well. Our kids should not be walking around their neighborhoods and talking about these very, very serious drugs, understanding them, and having to also in school be explained about Narcan and things like this. And I think, I have a 13-month-old daughter right now,
Hmm.
and I want to, for sure, when she's 12 and 13, let her be able to walk around downtown Portland without having the failures of our government in her face day over and over and over. And so that's what kind of drives me right now is solving those problems. And I'm the only candidate that has that experience of bringing communities together, working across boundaries, making sure that we bring a broad coalition. So it's not just East versus West or employer versus employee or landlord versus tenant.
Hmm.
We're in a pretty deep hole here in Portland, and I think it takes an effort from everybody together to work and solve these issues. And that's what I really bring to the table. It's years and years of building those coalitions. Certainly, my legal background that I bring to the table and policy work that I've done in the past. And so, we all know that the county is failing, that the Joint Office of Homeless Services is failing. The numbers are staggering. Last year, there were 785 overdose deaths in Multnomah County,
Hmm.
which is about 50% more than the year before. In 2022, the last year we have figures, there were 315 people that died on the streets, and that was 63% more than the previous year. And every year we have more and more people living in the streets. But then juxtapose that with Washington County or Clackamas County.
Hmm.
Washington said they've ended unsheltered homelessness. How is a neighboring county, just a few miles away from central Portland, able to end unsheltered homelessness? Clackamas County, 63% down, while every year ours is growing. So we're doing something wrong. And, I certainly have spoken with enough people in neighborhoods throughout Portland and Multnomah County to understand what the issues are, what the solutions are. The number one thing is our county's not listening. They have an idea, a philosophy, an ideology of how to address these things, but unfortunately it's failing. And instead of fixing it, they're just doubling down and spending more money on the same failed ideology.
Digging their heels in, kind of. And
Yes.
do you place that at the joint office's kind of feet, basically, or?
Well, certainly I place it at the county commission. That's the policy-making body. So the Joint Office of Homeless Services has gone through several leadership, and
Mhm.
right now it's Dan Field, and he is certainly a competent individual and should be able to fix those problems, but he needs the support of elected officials in order to make that happen. And there really needs to be a culture change there, a culture change of not letting people live and die in the streets, but bringing them to the services that they deserve. We need to have a compassionate society, but we need to have an effective society and all as well. And compassion is not letting people live and die in the streets.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, do you think that's like when you talk about the other counties that are successfully doing that? I've just I've talked to people from Clackamas the past week, and then I also talked to Keith Wilson on here, who kind
Hmm.
of laid out this cool plan that I thought was interesting. Of it's like shelter first, long term housing later, but it's just like this rapid shelter kind of thing. And is that kind of what you'd like to see?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I do know Keith, and we've had these conversations. But if you look at what Washington County has done, and Washington County did not, create something novel. There's other cities
Mhm.
that have either ended on shelter homelessness or had a huge reduction in that. And so we know what the successful cities have done, but we're patterning our behavior on what other cities have failed in.
Mhm.
So a little bit of a digression here, but I think it kind of proves the point. So our chair, Jessica Vega Peterson, enacted this program called Housing Multnomah Now.
Okay.
$14 million. Are you familiar with that?
No, I've never. I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been covered a little bit in the press, but basically there was a program in Seattle where they did rapid housing. And so Jessica Vega Peterson went to Seattle, saw this program, brought it here, got $14 million of the Joint Office budget to put people into apartments. There were about 100 landlords that said, we have apartments available. They actually insured those landlords. So if there was any damage, they would
Mhm.
fix that. and it was market rate cost. So it wasn't like Section 8 housing or low cost housing. It was whatever the landlords wanted to charge for anybody that needed an apartment. That's what the county would pay with $14 million. A year later, and $14 million, they housed 37 people.
Okay. I was gonna say this might be I'm familiar with that one that the goal was far higher than that,
Yeah, the
obviously,
goal
right?
was 300. The initial whole goal was higher.
Hmm.
They ran into some problems, so they're like, okay, well, we'll lower it a little bit,
Right.
300. But at the end of the year, it was 37. And so, that tells you the failures that we're having, because it's not about housing. I mean, we all want lower cost housing. We need it as a city. It's
Hmm.
it's very expensive to live here. People who work in Portland and Multnomah County can't afford to live close to their work sometimes. So we need affordable housing. But for a large portion of our homeless population, we need to solve the underlying problems first, which is drug addiction, mental illness. The average number of years that someone is actually living in the streets now is 6 years. So
Wow.
there's people that are maybe 20 years, people that are 1 year, but the average is 6. Now it takes about a year to 2 years if you're on a housing waiting list to actually get like a Section 8
Mm.
low cost housing. So these individuals, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of reasons, but have fallen off from that housing continuum. And to say that we can just take individuals, and in this case, they basically set up a table next to the Burnside Bridge. At that point in time, you may remember there were people actually living underside the
Hmm.
Burnside. They dug tunnels underneath there. There were fires. People were concerned about the safety of the individuals there, as well as the structural safety of
Right.
the whole bridge. And the county said, okay, city, don't move those people. We'll help those people. So they put a table out there, and they try to get people into housing. But at the end of the day, 37 people only, because mental illness, drug addiction
Mm.
are the factors that we need. So it's not a question for most people, not everybody, of getting people directly from the streets into an apartment. We have to do those intermediary steps. Now, the thought right now is that there's people going out there trying to help homeless people with those intermediate steps, getting them into drug addiction,
Mm.
mental illness. That's not happening. I dare anybody to walk around downtown for a whole day and see a social worker going to homeless individuals, or perhaps people using drugs on the streets, and see anybody actually do that outreach. It's not happening. I did a ride along with a nonprofit organization called Loving One Another, and they're not funded by the county or the city. It's from mostly donations, but um, uh, uh, they're out there trying to help people in their jurisdiction, but they're like, we're not seeing anybody else. They have one van, a couple people in that van, but they're not seeing other people do it. And I was out there, I didn't see anybody, but I
Mm.
also walk downtown. I never see anybody doing that outreach. So we're not reaching those individuals on the street one by one, and we can't. There's 5,000, 6,000 people living in the streets. We're not going to have 5,000, six
Yeah.
thousand outreach workers. So let's get those individuals to places where we can get them services, those temporary shelters where we can triage people. Because basically, right now, our streets are a waiting room for people with emergencies.
Hmm.
So let's bring them to where we can get them the treatment that they need, connect them with housing services, connect them with drug addiction services, mental health services, understand what their needs are, and get them into that continuum of care. That's the part where we're really missing out here in Portland.
Mm.
We're letting people live and die in our streets, thinking that somebody will go out and help them get connected to services, and it's just not working out.
Mm.
So I agree, we need to build up more shelter spaces. We actually have a lot right now, and there's a whole menu of things that we can do. So we have safe rest villages, we have these TAS sanctioned campsites that the mayor has set up, and there's more coming our way. We have places where you can park your RV. We have the congregate shelters that the county runs. We have high barrier shelters like Bybee Lakes, low barrier shelters, city teams, those sort of organizations that are providing shelter and detox capacity. And so we have a lot of different avenues for people to get into that system where we can get them help, but we're leaving them on the streets, and we
Mm.
can't do that.
Mm. Yeah, I was curious, like, do you think right now we're just doing a poor job of like connecting that network of? Because I agree with you. It sounds like there is this large network of shelter space.
Mhm.
But do you think there's like a disjointed kind of disconnect there?
Yeah, disjointed is a good word. It's disjointed on many levels. So on the most basic level is we're expecting homeless people, again, many of whom do have drug addiction problems and mental illness. You look at the point in time counts, about 60% say they have one or the other. perhaps both. You talk to people that work with them, it's actually much higher. And um, and so we're expecting them to be able to pull themselves off the streets. And so, what does a person do if they wanted to find shelter? Let's say I'm in a tent on a street and I decide that morning that I want to change and go into shelter. Well, let's say I call 211. They give me a list of phone numbers for shelters where I have to, for most cases, make a reservation. So
Hmm.
that same day, most shelters will not let you just arrive there. You have to make a reservation later on. So I have to be able to plan that not only do I need a shelter today, but maybe 2 weeks from now.
Right, right.
Okay, that's, and
Kind of like
then,
booking a hotel room or something. Yeah.
because there's no central database of where the beds are available. So I have to call all the shelters to try to find out who has a bed, maybe for today, maybe 4 weeks down the road. And then even if I do find a bed, okay, this is after me calling on my cell phone in a tent somewhere. Then I have to go to a central location in Old Town where I'm given a voucher for a bus that'll take me to that
Mm,
shelter.
mm.
Okay, no one's going to do that, right?
Yeah.
We're not seeing that people doing
That's
that.
like a something from the 1950s or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
And
crazy.
so why don't we have just the very basics, of being able to look online and see where the beds are available? Other cities have that. Las Vegas has that. Each shelter, how many beds are available that day online so you know whom to call. Instead, loving one another, those type of organizations, every morning they have to call around, find out where the beds are available. So if they're able to contact an individual, get them into shelter, that's how they do it. It's dysfunctional and disjointed in that sort of way. But more than that, we are paying a lot of organizations to do these services,
Mm,
but the county is not coordinating amongst them to make sure that everyone is working together in some sort of coherent plan to get people from, step one to step two to step three to step four. We're basically just shoving money out the door, which the county is very good at, but not holding people accountable and not making sure that there's a plan where everybody's working together. So it's not just disjointed on the county side, it's disjointed on the provider side, on these organizations that are getting grants and contracts with the county in order to effectuate these services. And so part of that is making sure you organize it. That's the success of some cities like Houston. They went out and made sure that all these organizations were working together, so there's not duplicative services, so that there's not different people providing different resources, but nobody working together. And they saw a lot of success in that. The Here Together organization, which represents a lot of these providers, nonprofit providers, actually flew the person from Houston that did that organizational stuff to learn from them. But again, the county's not doing that job that the Houston government did. And so it's disjointed on the planning side, it's disjointed on the very basic side, it's disjointed on how the money goes out the door, and it's disjointed on the expectations we have for how that money is being utilized and how those service providers are working together to provide success.
yeah. Um, I was curious the program you mentioned. I forget the name already. The Home Now or Home.
Housing Multnomah Now,
Yeah.
yeah, or House Multnomah Now.
In that exam or that in just what happened there, was that 14 million that was just spent and that's what they got for?
Well, I don't know what they ended up doing with the whole money, but that $14 million was geared toward, providing, the overhead because there's workers, but
Yeah.
also paying for those apartments. So that 14 million was available. How much of that was actually spent throughout that year on, basically people went out and set up a table. Like I said, they had to provide internet connections at that outdoor table, and what kind of social services, not social services, but what kind of social work was out there trying to get people in there. I'm not sure what the overhead cost was, but yeah, that 14 million was to pay for that rent, and obviously with 37 people, that didn't get utilized.
Yeah. Okay. I was curious. Um, let's see here. I am curious about how because I had a Nicole Busher in here yesterday who runs the union for the corrections
Oh
deputies.
yeah, I know Nicole.
Yeah, and we were talking about she mentioned, and I know you're more of like federal judge, but she mentioned, there's these county judge issues that kind of creep into her world. But I'm curious also just about your background as a judge. I feel like that'd be really helpful at the county level, just with um, our justice system in this county and in the city, and just it seems like it could improve. And I'm sure you have a lot of insight on that.
Yeah, I think I do, and part of that is certainly being a judge, which every day you're making decisions that affect people's lives, and you have to balance the equities, look at something, look at the facts, look at the documentation, look at the evidence that we have, and be able to analyze that with input from experts we have, so people with knowledge of certain key areas, and make a decision. So you're gathering a lot of information and you're making a decision based on that, which of course is very important when you're in office. But going back a little bit, so I'm a lawyer. I graduated from the University of Texas School of Law, and I went into private practice. So I did litigation for a couple of years. That was not the thing I wanted to do for my life. So I ended up working for the U.S. government, got a job as an attorney for the Department of Health and Human Services, and then got promoted a few times. So I ended up working as a senior policy advisor and a senior attorney for the head of a Medicare agency within the Health and Human Services. And I was working on nationwide policies, overseeing programs throughout the nation, different offices we had throughout the nation, providing certainly legal advice and policy advice to the head of the agency, as well as the managers of all these different offices we had throughout the United States. When the Affordable Care Act and President Obama unveiled the Affordable Care Act, I actually worked to make sure that all these agencies within Health and Human Services were working together to implement that Affordable Care
Hmm.
Act. And so that policy knowledge, that ability to work with various stakeholders, both private and public, overseeing large organizational projects and programs, that's going to be pretty useful on the county commission. But also, having worked at that, I was then able to get this job that I currently have, which is the administrative law judge with Social Security, doing hearings for the Social Security Administration. And it's a very unique job. A lot of times it's disability hearings, and so I talk to individuals that are they're applying for disability because they can't work, and saying what the reasons are for that. So talking with those individuals, a lot of whom are homeless, and so I talk to individuals on the streets and try to understand what brought them to the streets and what's keeping them on the streets, or what might be preventing them from being able to work. So it's a really interesting window into that. But also, I've spoken with people at the county, and I think the main kind of concern that a lot of individuals have is, why do we have this revolving door?
Hmm.
You might have read the story about the drug dealer that was selling fentanyl on a street corner downtown, who was arrested 9 different times
Hmm.
for selling fentanyl on the very same street corner. And there were a couple other arrests for different things, but the person was wanted on numerous charges, but had never actually returned for the trial.
Hmm.
So arrested, back on the street, arrested, back in the street, and never came back to actually answer for why he was arrested. And then finally, after I think the 12th time this person was released, the feds came in and arrested this person. Our federal government said, it's enough. This person
Wow.
is dealing
Yeah.
fentanyl. We're going to put this guy in
It's
jail.
like the DEA or something, or
It would have to be, yeah, the U.S. Justice Department was filing the charges, but I don't know who would be doing the arrest. Um, and and so why did the United States government have to step in at that point in time and arrest this individual? Because our policies within the judicial jail pipeline, district attorney pipeline, were failing us. Why was that person victimizing people on the street, selling people fentanyl, probably resulting in some of those 785 overdoses that we're seeing?
hmm
Um, and why was that person being released? And that's a partnership with, the judges. They set so the chief criminal judge sets those policies, but also in conversation with the district attorney, with the public defender, with the county commission, as to what those policies would be. And then the jail implements those policies based on how many beds they have available and all these criteria. So the county, is very much involved in public safety. And so there's an organization called the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, which no one has ever heard
Okay,
of.
I've never heard of. Yeah.
But that council is chaired by Jessica Vega Peterson.
Okay.
Used to be co-chaired with the mayor, Ted Wheeler, but Mayor Wheeler has not been around for some time. So now Renee Gonzalez is on there. But it has the DA, the public defender, the chief criminal judge, Also has the sheriff, has the police chief on there, and then a lot of these departments that kind of tangentially
Wow.
deal with
Yeah.
public safety. And they set these long-term policies for how the county will deal with whatever criminality is out there, including this revolving door policy that's
Mm.
failing us. And so once again, if you want change, the county commission is where we need to make that change in order to make sure we have the policies that work. And so my judicial background, my legal background will allow me to be able to talk to the judges at the
Mm.
county level to understand why we're seeing people return to the streets. Like the guy that was arrested for with 52 pounds of fentanyl. Did you
Right.
hear that story?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
The luckiest and stupidest guy in the world. I mean, the guy came from California selling drugs here in Portland, gets arrested, but then gets let go. And then he's like, okay, well, I guess I can sell drugs with impunity. So then 52 pounds of fentanyl, has some guns. He's a felon, so not supposed to have guns on him. Gets arrested for these various things. And 52 pounds of fentanyl is enough to overdose probably most of Portland.
Yeah.
Um, and then a couple hours later, he's back on the streets.
Jeez.
And so, luckiest guy ever, I guess, from his perspective, but then stupidest guy ever. He sticks around. So even though he's
Right.
from California, comes here to sell some drugs, he still stays in the area. And then the feds were able to locate him and arrest him. Those are the failed policies that we have to deal with. So we don't have these people that are victimizing other individuals. Oftentimes are victimizing the homeless population, but also we've had kids die
Yeah.
because they buy things that they think are prescription drugs, but they're laced with fentanyl or methamphetamines, and then they end up overdosing. So that's really the bottom line here. We have a failed criminal justice system, and we need to have people that understand the issues being able to once again talk with the DA, talk with the judges, and work on behalf of the county commission to make sure our policies are working and keeping people safe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great, and I think we need more people with kind of like your background in office because I think, in my opinion, we've had people who are leading by ideology for too long and kind of, leading by activism with no legal experience. So I think more people like you would be great on the commission. I have a couple silly judge questions. Can I
Yeah,
ask you?
sure.
Do you get to say sustained and overruled and that kind of thing?
I do. I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you,
There's not a lot of objections in the kind of hearings I
I
do, but
bet,
every
yeah.
once in a while, yeah.
And I'm guessing this is a no, but do you get to take the gavel home? Do you have your own gavel in your
No, I
office?
don't use a gavel. There
Okay.
are some judges that like that. I think it's a little bit of an anarchism, anachronism,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's, you don't need to hit
Okay.
stuff,
That's an old school
Yeah.
kind of
It's
thing.
an old school kind
Okay.
of thing. Yeah.
I just thought I'd ask that. All right. Yeah, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I'm curious. I've been talking about this kind of the Multnomah County Chair's veto power. I know it's not really a veto power, but the Oregonian did some reporting on it, and there's been a lot of discussion about it the past month or so about how the ability to kind of shut down the commissioners' conversations or even initiatives. But I'm curious how you would interact with Jessica Vega Peterson if you were elected, um, and if you were elected, you try to change that model of that power that the chair has.
Yeah, yeah. So, to give your audience a little bit of background, and then in case they haven't heard, so there's a lot of finger pointing in the county commission. There's a lot of acrimony on there right now. They actually had to do a retreat at one of the McMenamins, a closed door retreat where
Oh,
media and
really?
everybody else were not allowed to learn how to work together better because
Okay.
that acrimony was spilling over into their meetings. And part of that acrimony is a feeling on at least two of the commissioners. So Julie Brim Edwards, who's doing a really great job, and Sharon Myron, Commissioner Sharon Myron, likewise is doing a really great job. And Sharon Myron is the current commissioner in my district.
Mhm.
She's recently endorsed me for my run, saying that I can succeed
Oh,
going forward.
congrats. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And they're doing a great job in pointing out some of these difficulties. And what they're saying is, we're trying to represent our districts. We're trying to represent the needs of our districts, but the county chair is not letting us put things on the agenda in order to have that democratic process where we get to talk about things. And so, me being a lawyer, when I decided to run for the county commission, I actually looked at the county charter. I looked at the rules for their meetings as well.
Mhm.
which are both codified over there. You can Google it. And then there's a super secret executive rule, which if you Google it, it actually takes you to a blank page at the county
Are you
commission,
serious? Really?
at the county website, exactly. But that rule allows the county chair to set the agenda, which kind of makes sense. You have to have someone that gets a lot of input on what those agenda items are, and then someone has to actually say, well, this is the most we can do in one day, and then we'll
Right.
do the
Kind
rest
of
another day.
curate that. Yeah.
hmm and what the unfortunately the county chair is doing is using that as a rule to keep things off the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the charter and the meeting rules say that any of the county commissioners can put something on the agenda. So can the district attorney, so can the sheriff.
Oh wow.
Those are things that people voted on, and those are things that are by law are allowed. And then you have the secret rule that's being used, as you say, as a veto, because if you keep things off the agenda, basically you're vetoing the ability of anybody to make any kind of changes or proposals or discuss things that should be discussed. And we're seeing that over and over. There's an inability to put things on the agenda about the fentanyl emergency and things like that that we really should be discussing, but the county chair is preventing it. So I knew that that was an issue. I knew that that was illegal, what was going on. And so the process when I'm elected would be, if it continued, one, you ask the county attorney to review that process and find that it's illegal. And two is, if you have 3 votes in the county commission, there's a lot of other things you can do, including holding special meetings and so on, to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you actually get things done, or change the policies as they need to make sure you can put things on the agenda. Now, in the meantime, one of our law firms here in town, hearing about this, decided to do their own independent research. And so Stoll Reeves wrote a brief about this recently, and yeah, they found that it was illegal for the county chair to
I
do what she's doing.
just remembered. Yeah.
hmm
You're mentioning that. I've read that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's illegal from the point of, obviously, your constituents aren't getting representation at that level. Is that kind of
exactly,
okay?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's democracy. We have 4 county commissioners that represent 4 quadrants of the county. And if you're not letting them actually speak on the needs of their community, that's not democracy, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we're having right now. It's ruling by fiat rather than ruling by the needs of the people and grassroots democracy. So we need to change that in order to make sure that people are represented from around Portland, around Multnomah County.
Yeah. That sounds like a great, couple ways help get around or help solve that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jessica Vega Peterson is, she's been around. She's a politician, a long-term politician, and certainly when there's a vacuum, she'll fill it, as it is right now, which is, if you're given authority to do whatever you want, you do whatever you want. But this election really matters. So there's 4 seats that are open right now. Julie Brim Edwards is running for re-election, and almost assuredly she will win. There's not a lot of competition in her race. Uh, but if we elect 3 people that are willing to work together, I'm convinced that Jessica Vega Peterson will change the tune. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, there's not 3 people on the county commission that are standing up to that untethered authority. And so we need to make sure that we have individuals that are pushing for the needs of their district members, of their neighborhoods. And I'll certainly do that on the county commission.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I think if that commission gets, a new set of people, I think it'll be a totally different story.
Yeah, you had Jesse Burke
Hopefully.
on here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've known Jessie
I
for a
like
long
Jesse. Yeah.
time. She's a neighborhood association person, and she's the chair of the Old Town Neighborhood Association. I'm the chair of the Goose Hollow Neighborhood
Oh, okay.
Association.
Okay. Yeah.
And she lives in North Portland, so she's running for North Portland. But we work together for several years now on some of the issues facing Central Portland as a whole. Some of the, certainly she's dealing a lot with drug addiction, mental illness on the streets. You
Right. Old
certainly have
Town.
heard an
Yeah.
earful about that.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of solutions that we've been working on, including public safety solutions that have helped in some areas. And she's endorsed my campaign. I've certainly endorsed her campaign. Sam Adams knows what he's doing up there in the north as well. He's obviously been around for a long time. But those are the kind of voices that we need in the county commission. Those experienced voices that are out there walking their neighborhoods. They know what the needs are. They know what the problems are. Jesse, I love when she talks about her story about whenever there's a politician that comes over to talk to her, she makes him sit
Outside.
outside
Yeah. Yeah.
to see what's going
It's
on, and it really
smart. Yeah.
shocks you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's definitely needed. I didn't, I kind of forgot that about the Goose Hollow. You do the Goose Hollow thing too, because I used to work down there at KGW for years.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. You kind of got into this a little bit, but I'm curious. is there anything specific you would do with this? Because I just always picture this mountain of unspent money at the county for
Hmm.
homelessness.
Yeah.
And I just am like, what are we doing? I'm like, why aren't we utilizing this? There's no urgency, it seems like. But is there anything you would do with that money, or just I don't
Yeah. I mean,
know.
I
I know
would
there's a lot
definitely.
of things you could do, but
Yeah. Well, one is it's not just the homeless money, it's also the preschool money that's
oh
it's being
right,
unspent,
preschool for
that's
all.
been making preschool for all.
Yeah.
They're supposed to create a lot of new seats so we can actually get kids into preschool and pay for that.
Hmm.
We're not creating those seats, and that money is being underutilized. So there was $16 million infrastructure stuff that has not been spent, and they're actually looking. I think they're only shooting to spend a portion of the money that's actually available. So we need to find out why we're taxing people, why these taxes are bringing in way more money than expected. So both preschool and the homeless tax is bringing in way more money than the people that sold this to the voters said it was going to bring in.
Hmm.
So they keep on making the same mistake by multitudes. And then let's have an understanding of why it's not being spent, why the planning is not there, and where the failures are. So within the first week of me being in office, I'm going to call for a forensic and performance audit of the Joint Office of Homeless Services,
Hmm.
because we know that there's a lot of money out there that's going out the door. Once again, the county's really great at pushing money out the door, but they're terrible about accountability,
Tracking it, all
tracking it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The county auditor, has done a couple small piece audits of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and the first one was pretty damning. It said that she was not able to tell, based on the numbers, how many people they actually housed.
Mm.
So their data was so bad that she wasn't able to see how effective they were in housing people. Which it's the Joint Office of
Right.
Homeless Services
Yeah.
that are there to house people,
That should
but
be
she
the
can't.
one number you can determine, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
If you don't know what that is, how do you know anything else? So she said, 20% of the people that were put down as housed actually received harm reduction services. So they might have come in for a needle exchange or something along those lines, and somebody marked them down as being housed. So that's wrong. But then
Mm.
the other data was so murky that she couldn't tell. And then the second audit was more along the lines of that contracting piece. And once again, it was pretty damning. If the providers that we were paying were not meeting their goals, some bureaucrat just lowered the goals. Not trying to fix things, not
Okay.
trying to make sure our money was being put to good use, but just making it seem like we mission accomplished.
Achievable, yeah, in some sense, yeah.
So, but we need like a better idea of why the money's going out the door and why our homelessness population keeps growing. At the same time, why we have more and more money. Because if you do the math, about 5,000 people in the streets camping, and we have $412 million to spend, we should do a better job. And so the planning needs to be earlier. We need to have the facts available. So within 3 months, we will get an idea of what's working and
Okay.
what's not working, and then be able to fix that and make sure the money's going toward the things that work. And then we fix the things that don't work. That's how businesses run. That's how our county should be run. And then if we have excess money, which we do right now, a lot of the money goes unspent, but also if you fix these things, we'll know that how more money is being misspent. Then let's, fix these other things. So some of that would go toward low cost housing, which the county has done before. There's some expertise in doing that. And some of that money will hopefully alleviate the budget strains on the city. So the city right now is trying to remediate some of these failures in the county by building out its own shelters, the safe rest villages, the sanctioned campsites, and there's a whole other set of costs, cleaning encampments. Last I checked, there were 16 million pounds of trash that
Mm.
the city, the county, and nonprofits had picked up around encampments. And we know there's more that have not been picked up. 16 million pounds of trash.
That's a lot.
Um, and so that costs money, all those things. The Willamette River Keepers is saying that the Portland is breaking federal laws about river cleanliness,
Mm. Mm.
because the encampments, there's so much trash going in the river that we're now one of the 3 cities in the United States that's not in line with federal river
Mm.
cleanliness laws. So those sort of things that are costing a lot of money for us to remediate, that the city's paying for. If the county were to do its job, then the city could use that money to fix potholes, to pave roads, to pay for park services that,
Mm.
unfortunately, we don't have enough money for right now. And that's because so much of our time, energy, and money is going for addressing these issues.
Mhm.
but it's band-aiding over the issues, not solving the root cause, which is getting people into the services, being a compassionate society, and making sure compassion is about helping people turn their lives around and not letting people suffer on the streets.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a fantastic plan. I like that first week kind of initiative. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of going along those lines. I've been talking to some people from Clackamas recently about the supportive, what am I saying this right? Supportive housing services tax for Metro.
Yeah, SHS.
Yeah. And I'm curious just about your take on interacting with Metro if you're a commissioner, and also um, just that tax, because I know that they had asked, well, Emily could ask you at least about, Metro was thinking about doing this ballot initiative to take some of their money back from the county
Hmm.
from that tax. But I'm just curious, yeah, how you'd interact with Metro, and um, kind of just how you view Metro as well. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Metro has, like many local governments, has grown tremendously over the years. Added bureaucracy, and that added bureaucracy costs a lot of money. So, Metro is in charge of, the zoo. It's in charge of our arts venues like, Schnitzer and
mm,
and and
mm,
those sort of things. Um, but recently they passed the homeless services tax, which was a very novel thing. That's not something that the Metro has done before,
mm,
and they're supposed to coordinate with the counties to make sure that they're successful in doing that. So I agree with that. If you're going to pass this tax, let's make sure we're successful.
mm.
They actually put Multnomah County in a corrective action plan for some of the reasons that we talked about earlier, the fact that they're not spending money quickly
Oh,
enough.
really? Wow. Okay.
And the county fought back against that and said they didn't agree, but it's obvious that that's not happening. So, uh, but I don't think Metro needs to have that mission creep, which is Metro's not building houses.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're saying, well, let's do a backdoor tax. Let's take some of this money and use it toward purposes that the taxpayers did not initially intend.
Mm,
Yeah, we passed a homeless services tax. We told you it was going to raise, $250 million a year. It's actually raising $400 million a year. Whoops. Let's take that money and use it for other things and grow what Metro does. And I think if you're raising too much money, give it back to the taxpayers. If that
mm,
money's not being used, we have the highest tax in the country right now,
mm.
unless you're making more than 25 million. I'm not making more than 25 million. If you are, I hope you are, but if you're making less than $25 million a year, we have the highest tax in the country. And so we need to make sure our money is being spent wisely and not just throwing good money after bad. So let's not grow our government. I think the county has experience in building low-cost housing. Metro does not. So if we want to use that extra money to build low-cost housing, let the county do the job that it's done before. We've had a bond measure before where the county claims it's been very successful in building even more housing than they initially anticipated. If that's a success, let the county have more success, but let's not give new, bigger bureaucracy to the Metro. But I'm fully up with working Metro. I support them in making sure that our tax money is being spent well. I support them in putting extra eyes on the county to make sure the county is spending its money wisely. But I don't think we should keep on growing these government entities because a lot of that money goes to bureaucracy and overhead. It doesn't actually reach the people that it's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
reach.
It's a lot of admin stuff and that type of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm curious too. I've been asking people this, and I'm trying to get like a bigger picture answer of like, is that having a system like Metro above the counties, is that common in other metro areas?
No, it's a very unique system here. There are city county, partnerships. Metro is kind of a very unique thing. And the fact that we have four taxing entities. So we have the state, we
Right,
have
right.
metro, we have county, we have city, and they're all doing their own thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like they get
Mm-hmm.
together and they're like, okay, how should we better utilize these taxes so we don't have too much or too little?
They're all kind of siloed and
Yeah, they
doing
all
their,
want their
yeah.
pet projects, and so we want to make sure that we're working together on those things better, so we're not taxing people out of Portland, Multnomah County, which is what we've seen in the last couple of years. We've seen a lot of people leave.
Right.
Part of it is because of the crime. Part of it is because the taxes are too high. The latest figures we have from the preschool tax is a 20% decrease in the tax on high earners, which
Okay.
is over 400,000. So we know at least some percent of that 20% of people earning more than 400,000 have decided I'm just going to leave rather than pay for this tax. And that means there's less money to go around.
Mm.
Because say what you will about wealthy people, but we are taxing them quite a
Yeah,
bit to
they.
pay for the services.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that they stick around so we can get that tax money and pay for the things that we need to pay, and not drive them away and not drive small businesses away. It's a little bit of an aside, but I had a conversation a couple of days ago with an individual that is a small tech firm downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Still downtown, believe it or not, hasn't moved to Washington County or Clark County. They're sticking around downtown, and they're trying to get their employees to come back. And it's a tech firm. They're paying their employees on average $250,000
Okay.
to work and do the job that they have. Um, but they're having a hard time bringing their employees back to downtown, because if they work from home and they live in Washington County or they live in Clark County, Clackamas County, what have you, especially Clark County, they're paying much lower taxes. But
Mm-hmm.
the minute they come and work a day in downtown Portland, then they start having to pay Multnomah County taxes. And they're like, we can't hire people. And if we have people that are working for us, they don't want to come back to work because of the unfair taxes. So we need to make sure our taxes are good. And that means that all these entities have to work together. There's some people that have floated the idea of kind of what San Francisco did, which is merging the city and county government back together to,
Mm-hmm.
streamline some of these things. And there's a reason to ask about that. If the county and the city are not working together, which in the last few years they've not on a
Right.
lot of these very serious
Yeah.
issues, how do you make that better? One is certainly elect the leaders that'll work together. And I'm very proud that three of the mayoral candidates have endorsed me. Renee Gonzalez, Mingus Maps, as well as Keith Wilson, that's been on your show.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows, the fact that I've worked with these individuals in the past. They trust me, and the fact that we can work together going forward. But if we're just wasting money because we have different entities that are not working together, then yeah, let's talk about what the best way of solving that is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's all great. It's like, yeah, it's just people get confused, like you said a few times today, like even who does what, like what the city does, what the county does, and
Yeah,
then it sounds like even them themselves are getting confused, or not confused, but pressure to do some of the stuff that each other is supposed to be doing, if that makes
exactly.
sense. But
Hmm.
but yeah, I like all that. It makes sense to
Yeah, I
me.
like things that make sense. It shouldn't be a very hard,
You're right.
hurdle there. Let's do something that makes sense.
Hmm. Um, yeah, sort of going actually along those lines. I'm curious about your take on the new city charter, the new form of government in the city
Hmm.
that's coming up in this election. I'm just personally like more anxious about it as it approaches because it's just so novel and so new. I'm actually gonna at some point do an episode on ranked choice voting, single transferable vote, which I
I look
believe,
forward to watching that
yeah,
episode.
I'm trying to get the best people who know it because it is so confusing to me. But yeah, I'm just curious on your take on that and how if you were elected, the county would interact with that new
Hmm.
city council.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I've always been a supporter of having a city manager. Our commission form of government has not been working. It works when you have, really great leaders in place. So people talk about Vera Katz, an individual that was able to bring different communities together and
Mhm.
create good policies, get those policies enacted. So when you have good leadership, we see it's not as important as how the government is structured. But when you have bad leadership, that's when you see the real problems come out. Because when you put someone in charge of a multi-$100 million bureau, and they're not good managers, they're not good policymakers, they're not good spenders, but they're basically the CEO of all these bureaus, then we see big problems with PBOT. That's now I think $500 million behind, and
Yeah, yeah.
the fixes that need to happen around there. Well, where was that planning? Where was that money spent? Um, so we need a city manager, and you probably know I was in the charter commission. I advocated for some of these things. I think this, we went from one very unique form of government, this commissioner form of government that's no longer around in the United States and other cities, to another very unique form of
Right.
government where we have multi-member districts using a single transferable vote, a very unique form of ranked choice voting to elect people. And it was sold to the public, and it was one big package. I certainly wanted people to have a choice, whether they wanted, maybe four districts or nine districts, having smaller districts, having one representative or three representatives.
Hmm.
But people were given the choice that they were, and here's where we're at. But in my meetings with the public, whether it's small groups, large groups, I get a lot of questions about homelessness. I get a lot of questions about crime. Oddly enough, and maybe it's not odd since we're talking about it now, but I get a lot of questions about this voting system.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's not even what the county does, but
Right.
I know enough to talk about it, and people just don't understand still to this day single transferable vote
Hmm.
and what that means. How do you vote for people? What does that ballot look like? How do the numbers add up? Basically, you only need 25% to win, and if you make more than 25%, if let's say Dan Ryan runs in North Portland and he has name recognition, he might get 40% of the vote. I don't know. Well, that extra 50% will be distributed to other people,
So
and
it
then
shifts that
yeah.
anything over 25 gets shifted over. Kind of is
Mhm.
that the idea? Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of sloshes around. If you get too many votes, it gets diluted down. If you don't get enough votes, if you're in last place, then you're out of the race, and whoever voted for you, their second choice will go up. So it kind of moves back and forth, and it's way more complicated. And certainly, yeah, I hope your podcast goes into depth on that.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot at play. Like, how do you run for office? How do you find out, the what people stand for?
Hmm.
Now we have, I think, close to 70 people running for city council
It's a
in all
lot. Yeah.
these districts, and there's more coming our way. We know that there's other people that are weighing it. It's not until I think June that you actually have to file. So right
Right.
now, all
Right.
these people have announced, but the actual opening window for filing to run is not
Yeah.
until June, and the closed window is sometime in August. So we could have
Where's,
over 80 people, 90 people,
yeah.
100
Yeah.
people, who knows? So how do you bone up on all these people to know whom you're voting for? You'll have six choices. How do you know how to rank those people? Some of these people are going to be working together. What will that look like? There's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and the city is putting money to educate people.
Hmm.
It's going to go toward only certain parts of the city.
Right.
So in other areas, you're either going to have to go online and figure it out for yourself, or watch your podcast or those sort of things and try to get a better understanding. But it is very unique. The closest we have is Cambridge, Massachusetts, that doesn't have multi-member districts, but they use this single transferable
Okay.
vote.
Okay.
And
They just
they're
have one member per district, basically.
yeah, they just have one big election for their city council, and also I think for their parks bureau or something. There's like just one mass election for
Okay. Okay.
everything. But it's also several seats, so you don't need to have 50% plus one to win. You only need like a
Mm.
fraction of that. And Oregonian ran a pretty good article. They interviewed some people in Cambridge, and basically they said, there's some people that are really interested in this small thing, and that's what they talk about, and that's how they get their votes. They don't care about all the other stuff. The difficulty with less than 50% is you don't have to address holistically what
Mm.
your district needs. You only have to address what the 25% that elected you get in there, because
That's
that's how you
interesting.
get
Yeah.
reelected.
So you could be a single issue candidate,
Yeah.
basically, and just get in. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's a person running on in the West, Eli. He's a police
Yeah.
officer,
Yeah.
and there's certainly a possibility that there's going to be 25% of the people that want more law and order, that don't want crime to go unpunished, those sort of things. They'll vote just on that one thing,
Hmm.
and he has a full platform. I'm not saying that he's a one issue person, but in theory, you can get a person elected because people feel strongly about that one
Right.
issue.
Right.
And that goes all the way. We can get like a Trump type people elected because there's 25%. We can get some anarchists elected because your
Hmm.
district might have 25% of people that think that democracy is not a good thing.
Hmm.
So anything can happen along those lines, and we've seen other countries that do it. So in Australia, there was a far right anti-immigrant party that got elected because, once again, you only need a small
Right.
portion.
Right.
So like anybody else, I'll be, certainly, reading the papers, watching TV. It'll probably take a few days for the computers to do all the math, and I'll be watching with a lot of interest
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. And is there any? Somebody was telling me. Tell me if you know if this is true, but somebody was saying that the county next year is switching to some kind of ranked choice. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
so this is the last election for the county where they'll have a primary. So anybody watching this, my primary is May 21st.
Okay.
So go to my website, votevadim.com,
Absolutely, yeah.
and please vote in the primary. But this is the last year in Multnomah County we'll actually have a primary. Next year, certainly the city will be, or next election cycle, the city will still be doing its ranked choice voting, single transferable vote, unless they change it. But the county will be doing kind of the same ranked choice voting that other cities around the United States have had,
Okay.
which is, there's no primary, and then the numbers move around until somebody gets 50% plus one of the
Okay.
vote.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know.
Hmm.
Cool. Yeah, is there anything else you want to bring up before I get into these ending questions here about government or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer, and I think Keith talked about this, that this is the most important election that probably we'll see in our lifetimes.
Hmm.
What we're seeing is candidates that are status quo, that sort of are pro the policies that we have in place right now. And we're seeing a new breed of candidates that are out there that are saying, okay, I have experience. I've been out there talking to people. I know what the solutions are, whether it's me or Jesse or Vince Jones Dixon on the east side, or, certainly some of the mayoral candidates. And they're saying, no more status quo. We need change. We need people who are willing to be elected and governed by listening to people and by not ruling with failed ideologies and actually implementing things that work. And so for me, I cannot stress how important this election is, because we have a real time for change.
Hmm. Hmm.
City council, 11 new people. Dan Ryan will probably get elected, but 11 to 12 new people on city council, a new mayor, a new city manager.
Hmm.
On the county commission, 4 seats are open. As I mentioned, Julie Berm Edwards will get reelected, but 3 new people on the county commission. If you want change, go out there and vote. Know your candidates, look it up, because this is the year when we can really start turning things around.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk right now about this doom loop. Where Portland used to be, in the top 5 for a lot of good things. One of the greenest cities, one of the most walkable
Hmm.
cities, one
Hmm.
of the lowest crime cities. All these wonderful things that people were coming here for. Best food scene, one of the most visited cities, a lot of conventions.
Transportation. Yeah.
Transportation. Now we're seeing, transportation, fewer people going because there's been crime, and, there's been murders, there's been all kinds of stuff on our transportation system, drug use and things like that. We're actually seeing a decrease in the amount of people using transportation. But then all these other facts, we went from one of the top 10 visited cities, most cities that people were investing in to provide housing and all these things, to I think the 62nd or
Wow.
63rd
Yeah.
most. We went from having one of the lowest vacancy rates for office space. So there was a lot of cranes a few years ago building new apartments, new offices, to now the highest office vacancy rates in the country. Most recently, we saw the most lost jobs in the country here as a percentage of the
That's
jobs that we
right.
had.
Yeah.
So the counties around us are growing jobs, we're losing. And then we're seeing people move out. For the first time in 30 years, we're seeing a reduction in our population. Those are all bad numbers. And that's because of the failed policies. But we're seeing green shoots come up. We're seeing a lot of new possibilities. So one is, there's a lot of work to bring vitality back to downtown. So like the Keller Auditorium,
Hmm.
they're looking to remodel it, making it a world-class arts center.
Hmm.
They're looking at building a new music venue on the east side by the OMSI. They're looking at expanding the waterfront and making it more kind of like what Vancouver did in some sort of ways. Not
Hmm.
exactly, but building it out so it's a place where people want to walk and eat and shop and those sort of things. So there's a lot going on. We have some changes that the legislature has done to Measure 110 to allow us to get people with serious drug addiction into treatment, to use our criminal justice
Hmm.
system to get people into that treatment that they need. But we need policymakers, elected officials that are able to do that job. So for me, it's very important that we have a chance here to turn those bad figures into good figures again. But we need people that have that experience, have been able to work together, have been able to make those practical policies and that'll impact people's lives, allow you to have safe neighborhoods, and allow people on the streets to get off the streets and get the kind of help that they need. So I'm hoping everybody's listening to this will go online and look up all the people that they can vote for, whatever district they look into, and vote for change rather than the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very well put. And it's like you said, this is a fresh opportunity to get like a whole new lineup of people,
Hmm.
specifically this year. But yeah, the May election is also like if enough people vote, it's a pretty we make some of these changes this month or next month, I guess technically or
Exactly.
whatever. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me as much as you want to get into your Northwest story about how you ended up in the Northwest. Maybe you're already from here. I don't know, but how'd you?
Yeah, so yeah, I come from an immigrant family. My family are refugees from the Ukraine. I was living in Kiev, and then when I was 6 years old, my parents left. One of the most bravest things I can imagine. At that point in time, it was the Soviet Union,
Mm,
quite a while back, and no internet, no cable TV. They didn't know what they were getting into. They just knew that life was better in the West. So they were allowed to take a couple suitcases with them. Uh, every person was allowed to exchange $90, so we had to leave our money behind, our belongings behind. And with $90 and a couple suitcases, got on a train, and we were taken to Vienna. Vienna said, "Okay, well, here's a ticket to Italy." So we lived outside of Rome in an apartment with another family. We sold off our goods bit by bit, whatever we brought with us to pay for day-to-day type stuff. And then America allowed us to come here, and we came here not speaking the language at all. I started school without knowing a lick of English.
wow.
My father took odd jobs because he didn't speak English, so whatever work was given to him, he was worked as a coat checker or whatever was available to put food on the table. And we moved around a lot from job to job. And so when I grew up, I moved around a lot as well. I've lived in a good section of the United States, but then I came to Portland here on vacation, and I was staying downtown. And I remember this day. I was I left my hotel. It was around lunchtime, and it was by Pioneer Square. And the March 4th marching band, I didn't know who they were at the time, but I found out later. They were playing in Pioneer Square. It was a Monday. I didn't realize until later that the city was paying for, musicians to do that kind of stuff every day in different areas of the city. But that day it was Monday, and it was the March 4th marching band. And so you had people walking on stilts, as they
Hmm.
do. The band was playing, people were dancing, kids were running around, people working downtown were having lunch. And, I went to Multnomah Falls as every tourist
Hmm.
does, but I'm a big nature freak. I do a lot of hiking, camping, backpacking, that sort of thing. Love the nature around here. Went eat at Pok Pok at that point in
Oh
time,
yeah, yeah.
got rest in peace, Pok Pok, but that was a great restaurant. And I'm like, I got to live here. It's the most vibrant city I've lived in. Austin came in a close second for various reasons, but I really love Portland. And so I moved here, settled down, and said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to put down roots. But really, it was that vibrancy, that music, the arts, the nature, the walkability of the
Hmm.
town. I walked East and West Portland. It's so easy to get around, and that's why I'm staying. We're going through some difficult times here, no question about it. We can't paper over that. There's people that are suffering all over the place for various reasons, but uh, we have, if you talk to realtors or whatever, they're like the bones of a house or whatever that means. But the bones are here for the city. We have
Hmm.
everything we need to regrow. We have a lot of great people willing to roll up their sleeves, a lot of people that are volunteering right now to address the problems that our government's failing in. A lot of great restaurants, a few have left, but a lot of great ones here, a few more starting up. Great bars. There's a new place that opened up in my neighborhood called High Noon. So shout out to
Oh, that's
them.
cool.
But I don't know if you know Barlow's and Picnic House that was downtown. They closed down as a result of the pandemic and broken windows and all that other stuff that was happening over there at the time. But now they've reopened up a new place, and I got a chance to visit it. It's a wonderful venue. Those sort of things, that creative spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit that we have here in Portland is still strong. It just needs support. So that's a long question to your answer. But yeah, I moved here shortly after that. I was working in the federal government. We have offices all over the place. So I was at that point in time living in Houston, Texas for 2 years to be closer to family. But I was intent moving back to the West Coast, and I was able to transfer and manage the Houston office here as part of that, and it never looked back.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
It was about 10 years ago, so 2004. November 2014
14.
was when
Okay,
I moved
yeah.
here. Mhm.
It's just interesting because I whenever I ask people that, I see this trend of like people that have seen that kind of heyday of Portland, and it just seems like those are the ones that want to, change stuff, obviously, because you've seen how it was before. And
Yeah, yeah, and I know
yeah,
people have lived here for a long time. They've seen a lot, and certainly I think a lot of people are upset with how our politicians have let Portland down. And then, I love talking to people who moved here like during the pandemic or in the
That's what I
last couple
mean.
of
Yeah,
years.
it's strange to me. Yeah, because
Yeah.
they haven't seen the when it was better, So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. To kind of circle back on what you mentioned about the PSU library and some of the riots that we saw downtown. So my wife and I met about 2 years ago. So she moved here during the
Really?
pandemic.
Okay. Yeah.
So we met through a mutual friend and just hit it off, got married. Now we have a child, and our child is in daycare downtown. And we got a text and some emails that the daycare was closing early because of threats of riots happening downtown. And my wife, once again, she wasn't here during the heyday of the riots a few years ago, but nonetheless moved here during a difficult time and understands some of the issues that are going on here right now. She's like, "What the hell is going on? Why are kids not safe to be in daycare downtown? You
Hmm.
know, why do we have to rush and pick up our kids in the middle of the day because people are afraid of destruction that might happen downtown?" So it's not about broken windows. It's not about, that kind of stuff. That all costs money, and insurance and businesses go out. It's an important factor. But that safety thing,
Hmm.
why are our kids why are we having to be concerned about our kids because of some people that feel that lawlessness lives here in Portland? And so, for me, it's about making sure that the future for my child is brighter, that the future for other children is brighter, that we can all have the ability to grow here in Portland, enjoy our neighborhoods, get good jobs, pay for our housing, pay for our retirement, pay for our kids to go to college. That's what other cities are doing. That's what we can
Hmm.
do here, and that's why I'm fighting for that.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. Let me get into these goofy questions
Okay.
here. Um, let's say you're parking somewhere, going to work or whatever. Painted line spot is what I call it. I don't know if that's a correct term, but you pull in or do you back in if you're just parking normally?
Back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting more of that. More people are backing in. I don't know if that's like a Portland thing, but
Yeah, no, no, I'm great at that. There's those cars that do it automatically. I drove one of
yeah.
those cars.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. But I'm the best parallel parker in the world at this point in
Really? Are
time.
you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
have a sixth sense, so I see those spots. But yeah, yeah,
You're probably pretty, I guess if you're down in like Goose Hollow or just downtown, you're probably pretty
it's pretty
used to that.
congested. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I spend a lot of time, in and around congested areas, the Pearl and downtown, and so try to walk when I can. But driving and parking, is pretty good.
All right. Which piece of fruit do you think you could throw the farthest if you just chucked it across like a football field or soccer field?
Oh, that's a good one. Apple.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's kind of like a baseball, right? You can't throw a watermelon too far.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a banana doesn't have the aerodynamics.
I
So
say banana every time, but I need to test my theory.
I'll take you up on that challenge. You bring a banana, I'll bring an apple. Let's see. Let's
Okay.
go for it.
Yeah. Um, do you like crunchy or smooth peanut butter, or maybe you don't like peanut butter?
Oh no, I almond butter.
Almond
Yeah,
butter.
I'm a big
Okay.
almond butter eater. Yeah. Peanuts are apparently not a nut. But
Is that? Oh,
almonds,
I've heard that actually.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a tuber or something. Anyways, so I do eat the almond butter, but definitely smooth. The crunchy is weird. I mean, you got to chew that stuff
Did
and stuff like that. Yeah.
they make a crunchy almond butter? They do?
Not that I've seen, but it's possible.
Okay.
I mean, you'd have to go out of your way to do
You have
that,
to
but
make it. Yeah.
but for peanut butter, yeah, no question, smooth. Like I like to put peanut butter and jelly. Obviously, I don't
Yeah.
know what else you do with it. Like, do you eat the peanut butter on a celery stick at all?
I've heard of that.
It's
I'm
weird,
trying to
right?
remember. Is that no, I'm thinking of apples. You put them on apples for like for kids and stuff.
Yeah, I
My
mean, it's
mom used
fine.
to make that for me, but
Yeah, yeah, and it's you got to have PB&J is how it goes, but having to actually chew that stuff and bite into it, it's
yeah.
weird. So definitely,
Okay.
very
Okay.
strongly, I have very strong feelings about this.
Okay. Do they have stir or no stir almond butter? Do they have like the oil in there? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's pretty good consistency. I think the peanut butter gets a little bit more oily than the almond
Okay.
butter. I
Okay.
don't see the almond butter.
So it's not really a
Yeah,
concern with.
let your viewers know I'm an expert in almond butter. So
Okay. All
that's a
right.
lot of good answers I
No,
have
I
here.
like that. That's the first almond butter answer I've heard. Do you have a favorite type of French fry? You like regular fry, crinkle cut, curly fries? I
Um,
heard yesterday somebody told me I've never heard it's like sea fries or ocean fries. It's like something they do at the coast.
Now,
I don't know.
okay, so tater tots over fries.
Okay.
I'll go that way. I'm not a fan of thin fries.
Okay.
Have you had waffle fries?
Yeah, I like waffle fries. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of waffle fries. If they're like especially fresh made, if they have that
Mm-hmm.
special grater that
Mm-hmm.
does them,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty intense because you get that mix of like crunchy, chewy at the same time, and also you're not limited to like how many fries you can grab with one hand and
Yeah.
all that. You got like
Yeah, it's a
ability to,
handle. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like you brought up tater tots too, because some people have argued with me that I think it's a French fry. tater tot because it's a fried potato, but some people don't think it's a French fry.
Well,
I
it's
don't
not
know.
French. I mean, it's
That's a good point.
yeah.
Uh,
I went to France. I've never seen tater tots over there. So
okay. um, let's say you're getting ice cream somewhere. Do you go waffle cone, cone, or cup?
a waffle cone. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
tastiest option.
Well, two for the price of one, right? I mean, if you're splurging and eating all that sugary goodness, you might as well get that little crunch at the
Just
end
get
because
it.
that's the
Yeah,
best part, right? At the very bottom where the ice cream is kind of melted and you're finishing it off
that's
and you pop it
right.
together.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
a
no,
little
that's
drumstick kind of thing.
it's
Yeah.
magic.
And
Yeah.
do you have a favorite flavor, or what flavor would you be putting in?
I'm pretty plain. I like strawberry.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I do go to like salt and straw, but like kimchi ice cream, there's really no use for
Okay.
that,
I
right?
didn't even know they had that one, but yeah,
They had that
yeah.
one in the past. It's not a regular thing, but they've had it. So yeah, I mean, vanilla, I like it if it's like really good vanilla. And this is a heresy. I'm going to lose some votes on this one. I don't like chocolate ice cream all that much.
Okay.
I'd rather
Okay.
eat like a chocolate bar than chocolate ice cream.
That's interesting. I like
Yeah.
that because I've heard from a lot of, I guess, younger people recently that they don't even like chocolate, and I'm just like, what are you talking about?
No,
But
that's heresy for sure.
but people like to be selective with the chocolate, I think. Do you keep your butter out, or do you keep it in the fridge, or maybe you don't even have butter? I don't
Did you visit my house recently? Because this is a very pertinent question. So my
know.
butter is in the fridge, but I also have, I don't know what this thing is called, but it's like a little butter jar.
Yeah.
So there's
Okay.
water in it. Have you seen this thing
I
at all?
haven't seen that.
Oh,
No.
it's magic. It's magic. So there's the top, the lid has an opening where you put the butter in.
Okay, you like slide it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of pack it in there. And then there's a little hole and then the bottom part you pour water into it. And I don't know if it's called a butter jar or whatever. There's probably a word for it. And then you put it together and so the water kind of overflows maybe whatever, but it goes through that little hole so the water is touching the butter which keeps like any kinds of germs from growing
Oh
or what have
wow.
you. So you can store it for quite a long time because the water keeps, the bacteria from growing and it stays soft. And because it's butter, the water doesn't stick to it. So you take it out and it's just normal butter. So it keeps it fresh and soft. And I literally started doing this like maybe 3 weeks ago,
Okay.
and my wife loves it. But yeah, it's the best of both
That's
worlds.
cool. Yeah, shout out to that thing. I've never heard of
Oh yeah,
that, but
yeah,
it
man,
sounds like a cool
it's a good
device.
investment.
Yeah. This is kind of a newer one. Do you enjoy or do you eat string cheese? You ever had string cheese?
No, I don't need string cheese.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the
well,
question.
if you do, I'm kind of controversial on this because I just
Uh-huh.
eat. I don't peel it. I just eat that whole thing, and people are like, it's in the name, like you need to string the cheese and all that stuff.
Yeah,
And but
yeah.
you don't even like it, so it's I don't know.
Well, I mean, I like cheese as much as the next guy, but I don't want to work for my cheese, you know?
So you're on my side with this one.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I would eat it normally, but that's all kinds of cheeses in that at that point, why string cheese? But yeah, the fact that you have to do it and whatever,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
yeah,
I
just
just I my whole thing is like, if I were president, there'd be an age cutoff, and like you just need to eat it normally. That you can't be peeling it after a certain age.
yeah.
But
You know
but I
who
get a lot of pushback on that.
my dog loves string cheese.
Okay.
I went to dog training one time. I have an adopted dog. Got her when she was 1 years old from a pound in San Antonio. I guess they euthanize their dogs, and so there's a nonprofit that brings them here. She's a wonderful dog, very caring, very loving, especially around kids, but wasn't well trained.
hmm
And so, trying to work with her, we got into a really good place right now. But we had this idea of taking her to train her with other dogs, which caused a mess in itself. Nonetheless, the trainer was making her do amazing stuff. I mean, she was like reading books and all
Right.
kinds of things. And I'm like, "How are you doing that?" And they were feeding her string
Oh,
cheese.
okay, that's a trick.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, my dogs like string cheese.
I'm sh
Myself, I can take or leave it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. If you were forced to pick a gigantic brand to run, is there a brand that you'd like to run, like Nike or something like that? Or
If I were to
you know what I
pick
also
a,
heard a couple days ago was, or this last week was Portland General Electric, which I was like, I would, I don't
yeah,
know anyone who'd want to run a utility, but I've heard all sorts of different things.
yeah. I mean, so I would never want to run like a big company like that. That seems, you're basically trying to figure out how to make the most money from the least amount of effort. But
Yeah.
the what I would do is, I think right now, and this ties in with kind of what I'm seeing as one of the futures for Portland is, a tech company. So like an Intel maybe
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of avenues to bring good paying jobs here, living wage jobs to Portland that we're underutilizing. Part of it is our tax structure. Part of it is people want to, have a more of a stable environment, which we're not affording so much. But we need to bring those type of
Yeah.
organizations into Multnomah County. So, Intel, we don't have any Fortune 500 companies in Central
Yeah,
Portland.
no, because Intel's technically what, Hillsboro, or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and
But
so is
I
Nike.
agree. Like, in my opinion, we've been fading from this tech hub, this Silicon Forest that we kind of used to be. And I know there's still, Intel's still out there and stuff, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, we have some small businesses, we have some Google. We're not really, but we're not working to make that happen. So, San Francisco has become the AI place. Salt Lake City is becoming sort of an area where they're, building in or bringing in a lot of the design work and things like that for the tech industry and building out their version of tech. Austin has been the computer sort of place, a little techie on that side with Dell, and now they've got a whole bunch more. So, what do we stand for as a city? We
Yeah.
kind of lost that. Are we the green city and we're bringing the green tech jobs in? Are we, the hiking city? REI left, so we're not the hiking city
Hmm.
anymore. What do we stand for? How do we bring that back? And for me, I think, we need to bring some of that tech industry here, green tech, whatever that might look like, and get some, good jobs so we're growing and people can have a place to work after they graduate from PSU or whatever.
Hmm. That's a great answer. Yeah. Um, did you have a good meal recently? A place you want to shout out, or if not, it could be any local business. I just like to shout out
Yeah.
somebody local.
So I frequent a place called The Soup.
Okay.
It's on Burnside, over by the stadium. It's right next to the stadium,
Okay.
and it's a husband and wife that own it, and they kind of started that restaurant during the pandemic, so they got hit pretty hard right away, but they hung in there. It's a Korean place.
Mm.
I think the best bibimbap in Portland. You'll have to go to Beaverton or something to get anything equal, but they're also the healthiest. They grow their own microgreens and things
Oh
like
wow.
that.
Wow.
They have a little greenhouse in the restaurant as well. And so before a game, after a game, now they've opened up a little bar area as well. But damn good Korean food and really nice people that have been struggling for a long time. And so we got to support those small restaurants, small businesses and make sure they survive.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Okay, and you kind of mentioned this before, but if you like what Vadim's saying and you want to donate to him, you just go to your website and all that stuff. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, time, it's crunch time right now.
Hmm.
So go to my website, votevadim.com, and there's a place where you can certainly contribute. Every dollar I get now is about mailing somebody else about the campaign. Not many people are hearing about this campaign. I think the media is not doing the greatest job about the county races. Great job about the DA's race, but not
Yeah.
very great
Yeah.
about some of the other races. So the struggle right now is to get the information out to as many people as possible. Every dollar I get is one more mailer that goes out the door to somebody. So votevadim.com. If people have some time in their hands, we're knocking on doors and we're doing phone calls, phone banking, text banking. So there's a way to help out over there. But certainly, if you want to just learn more about my platform, there's a lot of information there as well.
Check it out.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I always tell people, anyone who comes on the show, I'll give you a donation, just for spending time with me today.
Appreciate
And
it.
and I think you're a great candidate also. I would vote for you if you're in my district, but I think I'm gonna vote for Julia Brame Edwards. I just got my ballot. And funnily enough, yesterday I was recording an episode and I got two flyers while I was recording on my door. So
Yeah.
you're right. There's
Yeah, and
passing
there's
on.
also, this is a little bit of a backdrop, but there's a lot of, I'll call it dark money going in. So my main opponent in the race has not run a good campaign. She only raised, I think, $20,000,
Okay.
about, a third to more than, actually a fifth of what I've raised at this point in time, but not being able to get people energized about her race. But I learned recently that there's outside organizations that have now raised $42,000 to help in her campaign.
Wow.
And I've seen the first flyer, and it's sponsored by that organization. In the news, she said she welcomes the help. Okay, so not turning away that dark money. And that flyer that somebody texted me says that she's the only candidate with union endorsements, which is a
Mm-hmm.
blatant lie. You go to my website, I have several union endorsements. I have some business endorsements as well. Once again, bringing people together. But that's one of the issues we're fighting for. That's why I'm trying to get the word out, because now we're seeing that disinformation come in,
Yeah.
flyers that saying that she's the only candidate with union support when that's not the case at all, and 42,000 that's being spent on her behalf, and maybe even counting. So we're trying to fight against that the best we can. So thank you for letting me be on your podcast and talking a little bit about the issues. I think we'll get there. There's a lot of good people willing to work together, and I firmly believe in a year or two, Portland, Multnomah County will see vast improvements. In the meantime, there's a lot of work to get done. So the next 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, I'm going to be pretty busy drinking
Yeah,
lots of coffee.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for talking to me today. This was an excellent conversation. And yeah, I hope you win.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah.